he said when they would shoot these blue beams down at him, right, that he could hear other humans on the ship screaming for their lives, like they were collecting humans and putting them in some kind of holding cell. And he said it was the most terrifying sound he ever heard.
Welcome everyone to First Contact. Today's exciting episode is Craig Campobasso. And Craig is a beautiful soul who I had the pleasure of meeting at one of the recent conferences that he and I were both speaking at. And one thing that really fascinated me about Craig was he was sharing about these 82 different races of ETs in his book, The Extraterrestrial Almanac, which is just this incredible book where he's compiled all these different pieces of information about the different species. And so, of course, Craig, I had to have you out on because who else has knowledge about 82 different races, right?
Well, I have more, but there's a reason there's only 82 in the book.
Right, right. Well, we'll definitely dive into that in a second. So, Craig is a writer, filmmaker. He's got 7 published books. His latest one is actually the UFO Hotspot Compendium, and he's got a documentary coming up, which we'll tell you about at the end as well. So, Craig, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Okay, so first thing I have to ask is, how did you learn about so many different races out there?
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I was 26 years old, I had a major spiritual awakening. And I had never, up until that point in my life, ever thought about life in the universe. I thought extraterrestrials were science fiction. And I wasn't even into science fiction or anything like that. And it just sort of led me on a path to just really want to know what was out there. So I started studying a lot of contactee cases. I started meeting a lot of ufologists, and I would go on cases with them, right, to study the cases because I just found it fascinating. And then talking with I really like Bud Hopkins when he was alive and all the work that he was doing
Mhm.
in regressing people who were having contacts, positive and negative. But then I'm friends with Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb, who are two of the leading hypnotherapists who have put thousands of people under that have had all different forms of contact, right? Face to face, all of that. So I started studying all of these cases. And at a certain point, um, many, many years later, through my former literary agent, who also loved UFOs, by the way, he did a marriage between MUFON and Red Will Weiser to start a MUFON imprint, right? And because he knew of my extensive knowledge on all of the contactee cases that go way back. I like the things that fascinated me were the human cases, right? And in the beginning, it was all human cases. There weren't any grays or anything like that early in the beginning, although they did appear and were part of history. But so he said, I've started this. We've already got a few books going. Um, I want you to write this book because I know you have extensive research. So actually, most of the races in the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac come from actual face-to-face contact cases,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so those contactees learned not only where they came from, but who they are, why they were here, what did they eat, what was their culture like, what kind of housing did they live in, all of these really fascinating kinds of things. Most of them were human, some were not. There's some very fascinating ones in the book as well. One of my favorite ones was they're called regalians. They're sort of like this lizard, almost hybrid looking being um, that now they can't come down here and interact with people, but what they did is their craft hovered around a Cherokee uh, nation. And, they were very aware of craft and different beings and that kind of thing. And so they brought up a 14-year-old girl onto the craft and they hooked her up to um, a neural thing, which the being also wore a neural thing so that they can communicate because she said they communicated through clicks and sounds and whistles.
Hmm.
And so what was interesting about this case is that she was able to maintain all the information because of this neural link. So when she came back, she was able to share about who these beings were, that they were benevolent, and that type of thing. The human ones, a lot of them came and interacted on Earth. Some joined our society, got jobs. There's many, many cases of that as well. And so I just found it all fascinating. And, people always said to me, well, then you'd have to believe the contactee. And I said, well, the interesting thing is I look at information as information. Whether it's true or not, you're still advancing your own spiritual awareness to band it out there into the universe, right? So that's why I believe, like a lot of experiencers and things like that, like me, I photographed an extraterrestrial with going on a case, a big case, which they're actually making into a movie now, right? And on that case, um, I photographed my mother in spirit form after she passed away. And, she was, with me during a difficult time, health-wise, right? And I felt her around me and she allowed herself to be seen on camera. So I knew, I mean, when I showed it to when I showed it to family members, they just cry,
Do you
right?
think there's a link between deceased souls and some of the ET phenomenon that we see?
Yes, yes,
What do you think
yes.
that connection is?
Well, I think a lot of, here's how I look at it. If you look at the bigger picture, where actually did your soul come from?
Right.
Were you from another planet? What is your home planet? Where did you originate from? Because all of the planets in the universe are schools, right? What are we learning here on Earth? We're learning duality, right? We're dualistic beings who are trying to become fully conscious, right? We're trying to marry our heart and mind to um, eliminate the ego or understand the ego on a bigger term, which brings us into unconditional love, which is what all of the benevolent races are here, with consciousness raising programs, star seeds, everything crystals, indigos, all of that, including creating their own from star seeds genetic materials, which was a part of their um, contract before they came in, is creating a human hybrid race of various star nations and then Earth genetics. And then those beings are also coming and living on the planet because, as they explain it, is when they're here, it helps to raise the vibration even higher. The Clarion race, for instance, lots of them came and lived here in Italy for a very long time. And some of them still are living there. And that was one of the reasons that they explained it. Other races that come decided to do different approaches, and they would write letters to top scientists explaining how certain things work to help benefit the Earth.
Wow.
Right. So there's so much that's out there, and I'm only like just touching on the tip. There's so many things out there. Now, the only reason there's 82 races in the book is because the publisher said you have 300 pages, um, and we only wanted to do a thumbnail review on each race. And I was a fan of Paul Hellyer when he was alive, the former Canadian Minister of Defense, that talked about ET visiting us and many, many races. And at the time of his death, he said he knew of 82 races that were visiting Earth. I myself had compiled over 120. Um, and so I said, well, let me see if I can fit 82 races in the book. And so I was able to, and so that was my way of paying homage to Paul Hellyer.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah,
So, with the 120 races that you've discovered so far, how many of them would you say are benevolent and maybe living in a more evolved state of being?
most of them,
Okay.
most of them, right? There are, it's interesting because the grays are like this anomaly because there's so many branches of them. There's little tiny ones, there's 3 foot ones, there's small 4 foot, 5 foot ones, there's the tall grays, there's all of these various different versions of them, but they also come from all over the universe. We primarily know them from Orion and Zeta Reticuli. Um, and those places. Um, but I think the ones in the beginning were the what we would consider a negative race because basically what they were doing is they were raping individuals of their genetic materials without their consent, right? And it is said, nobody can prove it, but it is said that they worked a deal with the government that they could do that, but only with under undesirables on the planet, meaning homeless people and that kind of thing. But that obviously did not happen. But then again, in talking, I've spoken with many abductees. Now there's different analogies, right? People who are experiencers and that kind of thing, or star seeds, they're invited onto craft in their astral forms and they remember, right? That is not being abducted,
Yeah.
right? Abducted is being taken against your will and brought onto a craft, right? And they do your genetic materials. Now, Betty and Barney Hill, for instance, they were abducted, and they did take genetic materials, but they explained that they were more on just um, an expedition to find out, where people on Earth were. They weren't taking it to make genetic children, right? It's a whole different story with them. And Junior, who Betty named, who was the leader, looked totally different than the other Zeta Reticulans. They were the positive Zeta Reticulans, which I think are from B. I can't remember. The more positive ones are in B, I think, and the more negative ones were in Zeta Reticula A. And but she said that he was extremely friendly, and that that his eyes were a little slanted, but the eyes were like a gecko's eyes, which was
Well,
very interesting because we had never seen that in any of the other cases, right? So we don't know if he could have been a hybrid or or what, but his skin was blue with a silver tint, and it had little bumps on it, right? Like little bumps on his skin. But Betty really got on with him. She did a bust of him. Um, I have the documentary to the ET Species Almanac coming out, and Kathleen Marden, who is Betty's niece, she does talk about that case and the Zeta Reticulans and Junior at length. And it's just fascinating to see that each person who is either having face-to-face contact, or if they're experiencing or doing different, or abducted or what have you, everyone's like holding a little piece of the pie. And we don't know what the very big picture is. I remember David Jacobs saying, he was terrified they were making hybrids to take over the earth. Um, no, hybrids hybrids are already here, but hybrids are how you raise consciousness,
hmm And why
right?
do you think that's such a critical part of that? Is it because of a DNA shift, or
Yes, yes.
is there a way that we could lift consciousness without hybridization if we, say, for example, meditated or found other ways to connect?
Well, I think there are many ways they do it in many different ways as well, not just through hybridization. But it's inevitable. Throughout our history, we've seen that we've had genetic upgrades
hmm
in certain sectors of history, right? So where did that come from,
hmm
right? How did we all of a sudden go from here to here and then from here to there, and that kind of thing? So, um, I've got a couple of hybrids actually in the documentary, who are from different places. And they tell their story of hybridization. Barbara Lamb also talks about hybridization through all of her regressions, and how hybrids can come into being in its many, many different ways. Um, but I think not the quickest path, but a path that's going to help people advance also a little bit quicker, right? Like, for instance, like are your parents, were they spiritual beings, or did you just become all of a sudden totally attracted to this?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I see everyone as a spiritual being on different scales.
Right. Well, different levels, but I'm talking about, do you think your parents were star seeds
I think so. I don't think they're fully aware of it, but
of
I
it? Yeah.
like they've got that sort of inclination, and I think that's why I chose to incarnate through them, because
Yeah.
that openness to it.
That's right. Yeah. And some of the kids that are coming in now are coming through very advanced star seeds who are very aware of who they are and where they come from.
Mm.
And these kids are extremely brilliant, right?
Mhm.
I've met with some of these kids. One kid spoke five-star languages.
Wow.
Um, I got an EVP once, a very like you and I are talking, of a woman speaking in another language. I gave that to all kinds of linguists, um, everything. And people are like, nope, I have no idea what that is. I gave it to the kid. And he goes, oh, that's Pleiadian. And he's saying that they just built a base around the corner from where you live.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and which was interesting. And then I met another woman who had over 18 extraterrestrial cultures energy on her giant property. And the ships would come over and you would feel this this energy. And in her place there would be orb storms if you've ever caught an orb on camera. Um, and it's just orb after orb on top of one another. And some of them are diamond shaped with colors in it. And I caught the very first heart-shaped orb on her property as
Beautiful.
well, which was really, really nice. But, you know, she also knew languages and she also said that that was Pleiadian script. So,
Yeah.
which I found fascinating.
Yeah, so when we talk about hybridization, I think there's a lot of information and maybe misinformation out there as well.
Yes.
Based on all of your research, could you clarify for us, like how would you define a hybrid? How do you know somebody's a hybrid versus not? Is there a specific genetic marker or like how would you identify that?
Well, there is a woman who does very advanced astrological charts.
Hmm.
And there's a certain aspect when people come in that she can tell if they are a star seed or not, right?
Hmm.
So there's one way. Um, I have met people that I just knew weren't from here.
Hmm.
Their vibe felt like they weren't from here, and my vibe is that, they probably were a star seed. They probably have some genetics. Um, a hybrid friend of mine's father was in the military, and they were doing DNA exchanges. And so, um, when his wife was pregnant, they had injected three different kinds of races, genetic materials into the embryo, right? And that's pretty much how it's done. In the beginning, it can be done through your DNA also later as well. It can also be done through the aura, right?
This is the thing I'm still figuring out, which is the nitty-gritty of how DNA activations and these genetic shifts really work. I'll tell you
Yeah,
what I know, and you can probably add to the information. So
sure.
in 2015, when I went through my spiritual awakening, I first connected with the Arcturian Council of Light. They shared with
Hmm.
me a series of sacred geometries and told me that these geometries were for the purpose of DNA activation and
Yeah.
upgrade. I did them on myself. I shared them with people. People had incredible experiences, spontaneous healings, awakenings, just like really expansive kind of experiences. People started seeing the Arcturian starships as a result of geometry. Now, the way that I look
Yeah.
at that, I go, okay, cool. I understand that geometry is the energetic makeup of the universe, for example, the flower of life, and you've got other sacred geometries that do that. So these galactic geometries, the way that I've understood it is they energetically open up these kind of like holographic portals within the etheric DNA, which actually sits in not the physical DNA strands, but the remaining 10 strands that are not in physical form. So if I went and did a DNA test, I don't know that I would see anything out of the ordinary in my physical DNA. But when we look at it from the etheric perspective and the aura or the sort of
Hmm.
energetic component of that, my energy is very different to other people's, and I know that. So
Right.
when we talk about hybridization, are we talking about that energetic component, which I know a lot of people have, or are we talking actual physical changes that would show up on a DNA or genetic test?
Well, first of all, if they are going to inject the embryo, it's not going to be with the physical characteristics. It's
Right,
going to be with the intellectual, right?
right.
So they know how to section those off, right? So the thing is so when somebody already has that within them, as they're growing up, I've been told that I'm that. I don't know that I am, right? But I've been told that. But ever since when I was a little kid, I saw, I saw spirit forms moving about. I saw an angel when I was 10. I saw when I was around 10 years old as well. I was sitting in the bathtub and all of a sudden, I went into this catatonic state and I looked at my reflection in the nozzle, and my whole spirit was pulled way out into the center of the universe. It opened up. I went inside of it, and I heard all of the questions that we asked ourselves much later in life. Who am I? Where do I come from? Blah, 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 blah. Boop, back in my body. And then just sat there for a little bit. I had these experiences when I was a kid, but then they just faded immediately away, and I never discussed them with my parents at
Mm.
all, right? I never did. But when I was 26 and then I had that awakening, um, it was really profound, and that woke me up. And then these three master teachers fed me after after 6 months of awakening. They fed me a golden light, which went into my cells, and it woke up my cells to cosmic heritage.
Mhm.
And so that's when I say is like then like little capsulated pills is when all of these things started coming in and flooding in and more experiences. And, my experiences were physical experiences, even though they would come in their astral forms, right? In my actual residence, um, I had physical experiences with them, right? Which were really amazing, but these were really advanced beings of light, right?
Mhm.
So there was never a fear. There was never, ever a fear. I always felt just this warm, warm, unconditional love. And I just felt nirvanic all the time, when I would have these experiences. So I think that in the sense of, we know on one end, hybrids are being created to help upgrade the genetic pool. On the other hand, beings that are taking it are doing it for their own agendas, or as in one specific uh, point of the Greys is that their genetics were deteriorating. They started cloning themselves, and they couldn't. And they started dying off, and they couldn't reproduce, and they could no longer ascend either. They lost the genetic codes to ascend because they had lost. They were more scientific, so they didn't have emotions, right? So that was one of the components also that they wanted to have. So they just took it, right?
Right.
They just took it instead of going through the proper channels, which they could have done, um, and that kind of thing. So, and we know a lot of the stories, with the Greys, and people are brought up and they see their children. I will tell you. Uh, One case that recently came to me is they brought a husband and wife up, and it was their children mixed with gray DNA,
Wow.
not just the wife's, because they usually take it from the female. But this
Yeah.
was a husband and wife. So it was a little bit different, right? And she didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave. But, they find that if these children do not get the love and being held at an early age by their biological parents on both sides, that they die off,
Yeah.
right? That there is this need. this need for that. And I know a lot of people, who have done that. I know a lot of starseeds see their families back home and see their children, and they want to go home so bad. I mean, I remember one woman, she was here, she was married, she had a couple of daughters, and she told me that she was going to commit suicide so she could go back home because she missed them so much. And, and I told her, I said, look, you signed up for this. And so if you do that, they're just going to put you right back in the reincarnation cycle until you do what you came here to do. So you're going to prolong what you have. And I eventually, talked her out of it, because, that's the way these things work. You got to come and fulfill what you need, because that's what your soul needs, is to come and and help humanity, right? I love that my favorite expression is, when one helps, all help,
Yeah, that's so.
right? It's a beautiful thing.
And I think we've all, I mean, literally think that all 8 billion people on the planet right now have, on some level, agreed to this experience, this ascension.
Yes,
Sometimes we look at the world around us and we think, really, that person's part of the ascension, and we judge and, all of that. And yes, everyone is part of the ascension, because if you're on the planet at this time, you've agreed to be here. It's just that some people have a higher level of awareness of that. And that's why I think
right,
sometimes, it's not always conducive to segregate ourselves and say some people are star seeds and some people aren't, because I don't know, maybe this is just me being idealistic, but I see everyone as a beautiful soul, whether they've come from whatever historical background in the galaxy. Our souls are so multidimensional that even the
yeah,
concept of star seed feels very, very limiting. Like I know I've got galactic lifetimes, I'm connected with them, I know my soul aspects that are on the Pleiades and Arcturus and various spaces. So like I have that awareness, but then I also have an angelic self, and I know that there's non-humanoid versions of me. And so when we expand into that higher awareness and go, you know what, there's a soul, there's this beautiful spark of light that
yeah,
comes from divine source, and it just has all these experiences. Even the story of the hybrids and the star seeds, I feel like, is sometimes limiting. So
right,
then I'm
right.
trying to wrap my head around, like, what is that identification around that? Because you could say everyone's a starseed because your soul has
Well,
experienced some starry galactic lifetime. So then everyone would be a starseed, but maybe just not aware that they've come to Earth at this time for that specific reason. I mean, this is just my contemplation.
right.
I don't know
Well,
what.
there's things of people who have come here for one specific purpose, is to learn duality, and then there are the starseeds who are coming here with the specific purpose to raise consciousness,
Yeah.
right? Not that the others don't want to raise consciousness, it's just two different distinctions. But everything you said, yes, absolutely, absolutely beautifully said. It's just different distinctions, and I think that they're all just different programs to, push it forward, because, this is such a unique planet that, there's so much diversity on the planet, um, with killings and wars and, all of those kinds of things. It's interesting. It brings me to always remember, when people pass on and then they come back for a brief moment to give a message to a loved one. I remembered um, Roger Ebert of Siskel and Ebert. When he passed away, he came back and he said to his wife, "Oh my God, honey, it's all a lie. This is all a lie. This is all make believe. It's the real thing over here."
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it like, maybe the universe goes, "Here you go,
Yeah.
physicality, and,
I
you
think
know,
I'm tired of this. I
spread
think.
your wings." It's exciting, and it's a beautiful thing when you look at duality and the spiritual tool that it is, of how we all are um, evolving through our own emotions, right? Mastering our emotions.
It's beautiful. And I think that's the gift on Earth as well. I mean, I know that on a lot of the other planets, you don't get to have the same level of emotional awareness and experience that we have here on Earth. And so the very thing that so many people hate, the suffering and the roller coaster that sometimes, an earthly life can feel like, is the very thing that souls come for. It's like
Yes.
that is the experience. That is what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And yet we shy away from that and go, oh no, it's too hard. I don't want to be here. And I think sometimes it's just that awareness of that wait, this is just a role. This is not real. This is not, I mean, it is real, but it's also not real because this is the
Right.
experience that we're having. And I wonder, going back to that soul perspective, I mean, with all the different races that you've connected with, surely there's such a wide range of experience that these other 120 races are having. I mean, do you have some idea
Mhm.
of what some of those themes might be on other planets or in other dimensions even?
Well, I there was a race called the Yargans, and this was from a man who I can't remember exactly where he's from, but it's like a foreign country. And he was having face to face with them. Um, and they were humanoid, but they evolved from what would kind of seem like to be a seal,
Okay.
right? So they had that kind of skin, um, and that kind of thing. And they were a very affectionate race. Um, and they lived in their planet was primarily water, right? Because they originally lived in the water and then, eventually became upright and started walking. And so they don't have much land, so all of their places where they live are in these giant cylinder buildings, you know, in these kind of cities. There's another gentleman, his name will come to me, but he worked in Vegas at the outside of Vegas in a place where the tall whites and the grays were with our military. So the
Wow.
tall whites were on one side and the grays were here. And he gave what who they were like emotionally, right? He said that they had killed many guards before if they felt that they were going to be a danger to them, right? And then we all say, well, why'd you take the job? Right. And he said, but I just had this different interconnection with them, and they seemed to have a trust with me because they would vet us, before. But he said the tall whites were very protective of their children, and they didn't want any military, anybody getting too close to them. They said the grays just let their children run wild, and they didn't seem to care about them, which I thought was interesting. Well, that whatever that part of the gray race was, right?
Yeah.
So because I don't know exactly where they were from because he didn't say. Charles Hall, that's his name. Charles
Yeah.
Hall. Yeah. So, and then others, um I don't know what they look like, but Dr. Frank Strange's, that's the posters in the background. He wrote Stranger at the Pentagon, and I did the short film, and I'm doing the giant feature film as well. And he told me that Valiant Thor told him that if he ever saw ships that looked like a beehive, to hightail it out of there. He said those house the most evilest beings in the universe, right? And it was interesting because, when I started looking into the Gulf Breeze case, those ships look like beehives. And Mr. Walters, I can't remember his first name, but he wrote the book. He took pictures. He's gotten lots of pictures of them. Also and I put it in the UFO hotspot because MUFON and Project Blue Book were there and they detailed it. There were many eyewitnesses and all of that. They tried to poo-poo him later on, saying he made it with paper plates, right? So, but all of them said that that absolutely was not true. But he said when they would shoot these blue beams down at him, right, that he could hear other humans on the ship screaming for their lives, like they were collecting humans and putting them in some kind of holding cell. And he said it was the most terrifying sound he ever heard.
How did they
So,
hear the sound by shooting that beam of light down?
well, maybe that beam of light was to bring him up on the ship because he
Oh.
was getting away from it, but maybe there was sound attached to that beam. I don't know. He didn't explain that.
Hmm.
But it's just fascinating to hear. There's other races that are just neutral that come here and, you know, um, kind of like the tall whites are pretty neutral, right? They've been here for thousands of years, that kind of thing, and they're studying the environment, they're studying us. And here's another part of the hybridization is they actually start hybridizing with our DNA as well because it helps them to maintain the bodies here on Earth, but they literally study us by becoming us,
Mm.
which is another fascinating aspect.
Yeah, I have heard that as well. I
Yeah.
wonder if the coming back to that ship for a second, I wonder if the sounds of the humans is like a defense mechanism. So it's like they put that sound out to stop you from harming the ship because it might have your own people in it, you know? Like that would be a very clever defense.
Well, he didn't have a gun or anything like that, and they came and appeared, over his house several times,
All right.
and up and down the street. And it really was, these ships were seen quite a lot. So it was a very fascinating case study.
Yeah, right. And would it be associated then with missing persons? I mean, if the
Well,
people,
it could be. It could be.
yeah.
It could be. I don't think they delved that deep into it. Or
Right.
maybe somebody did and just never, posted the findings.
So, as we sort of look at this whole overarching phenomenon of, ETs, they're visiting Earth, some of them might even be living here with us. What do you think is the purpose of all of that?
Well, planets don't belong to one race.
Right.
Planets belong to the universal race. That's one thing. Um, they're also coming here checking on us because, we're venturing out into space and we're an aggressive race. So they want to make sure that they're protected there because the all of the planets in our galaxy are populated on the interior of the planets, right?
Hmm.
There's many reasons for it, but one is they can terrace it to make it like a ship on the inside, but they can control the resonation fields that keeps their cellular structure young, and that's how they live for thousands and thousands of years, right? So they have that. They also have these things called synchrotron skies. So you could be on a floor, that's a daytime floor, and you can look up and it would look like looking up when we look up, right? And the synchrotron will go fade into night. Some floors are always day, some floors are always night, you know. It just depends, that kind of thing. But um, bombs and all those things affect the alignment of all the other planets and also the planets interdimensionally. So that's one of the things. That's one of the things Valiant Thor came to talk to Eisenhower about in the very beginning, along with a divine design to eliminate sickness, disease, and poverty. Salganda also was a being that came before Valiant Thor in 53 and gave George Van Tassel the blueprint to build the Integratron, which would do the same thing. Once it was turned on, he could get 10,000 people through it every day, and that would rejuvenate your cells and put you back in pristine working order. Dr. Frank used to say, if you were old man and walk with a cane, and the minute you walked on the ship, you would walk like a spry young teenage boy. He said, if you wore glasses, you had 20/20 vision.
Do we still have this technology?
Well, they have it. We don't. Oh, well, the original technology um, at the very end, saw it was 95% there. And Salganda told George, I'm not going to allow you to turn it on because they're not ready. Right, with everything that he had seen from, because it took many years. That's why George Van Tassel started having all the UFO conventions out there at Giant Rock, because he lived under Giant Rock. He ran the airport there. So, in its heyday, there were 10,000 people out in the desert, with all of the contactees talking about their experiences and all of that. So, it's a pretty fascinating time. I mean, that's the birthplace of ufology is Giant Rock.
Right. And what happened to these blueprints?
Well, after Van Tassel died, which was not long after that, it is said that some unknown persons came in and took all of the stuff. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if his wife took it and put it somewhere for safekeeping, if his children did, or what, but it supposedly vanished, and then it got sold to someone who let it sit there, just unattended. And then it got sold to the three sisters that own it now, who many years ago, when they bought it, refurbished it, put it back in, beautiful working order. Have you ever been there?
To where?
The Integratron?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, you got to go. You got to go.
Haven't
It
been.
is the most mind-blowing experience because, it's a domed building. There's a second floor. So it's a sound chamber. And so they do the singing bowls up there, and you lay on mats, and it actually feels like you're levitating
Wow.
during that. So you do feel the resonance of your cellular structure getting higher in that respect, but the building, just isn't, never was turned on. But it'll be interesting to see if at some point maybe somebody else will come and say, okay, it's time to turn it on,
When you say
right?
turn on, I just have so many questions about this. You're telling me
Well,
some kind of
so
technology.
what it had these little things that came out of the side. So first floor, then it would lift up on these hydraulics and it would start to spin.
Hmm.
And the whole bottom floor was lined with copper coils, right? And so when it would spin, it would create whatever this electromagnetic energy is. Yeah, people can go to the Integratron.com, can read all about it there, in the archives that they have. You can look at it online, they give it to everybody. Um, and because George will explain it way better than I can. But when it was turned on and it would start to spin the center part on the hydraulics, then you would get the people to go in through one door on the bottom floor and walk across the floor and out the other side. That's all you needed, he said. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's mind-blowing in and of itself. The fact that we potentially have this technology on Earth that could heal everyone, uh,
Right.
and the fact that we're not using it. I mean, that's just I don't even get that. Like, I don't understand why that's the case.
Well, the understanding is it would put doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies out of business.
Well, it's not good enough for me. Sorry.
Well, I know, not good enough for us, but that unfortunately isn't how this planet is run.
I wish I could go back to that moment and have this conversation, or even just be a fly on the wall for some of these interactions that happen. Because I know
Yeah,
that many people in the US government were being contacted in this way. And I mean, it seems to be a
yeah,
little bit more subtle now, right? Like we don't hear as many of these experiences. I think because we have the internet and news just travels so fast. I think back then, if there was a meeting, they could keep it very hush hush. If it happened
right.
today, it would be everywhere. I mean, I think secret meetings are still happening, but probably not to the same extent as what they were before.
Here's the good news though. There is a really good part of the government,
Hmm.
not like the presidency, not that, but there is a good part of the government that is doing things to benefit Earth. And then there's the military industrial complex of which Eisenhower talked about when he left office in his speech and about the dangers of that, right?
Yeah.
So at least we just don't have one negative force going. We also have a very big positive force going as well, but you don't hear much about that. But little by little, people are coming out and, talking about their experiences. Celebrities that I've worked with have told me the UFOs they've seen. They've told me about abductions,
Hmm.
that they themselves have been abducted and what happened during the course of their abductions. And and another woman fighting with a gray that was trying to take her daughter from her bedroom when she was a child.
Wow. Gosh, that's
Physically.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I believe you.
yeah,
What a crazy world we live in, right? And
I
that's
know.
keep having these conversations. I think people need to be speaking up. We need to have these conversations. I think
Yeah,
one of the biggest things that I've taken away from this conversation today is, first of all, that there's a lot of hope and that we've got a lot to
yes.
look forward to. I'm like personally a little bit mad that we have this technology and no one's using it. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. You think I would have known this by now, but I really haven't heard about it until now. So this is like news to me and probably a lot of my audience as well. So that, like, I feel a little bit of like charge in there right now of like I wish we could access that and have that, because a big part of my work in the last 10 years has been talking about, access to technologies and knowing that this potentially already exists. There's definitely something in there. So I think there's a hopeful conclusion to this conversation in that we
There
keep
is.
talking, we keep, looking upwards. And of course, the philosophy here at First Contact is that first contact is right here, it's right now, it's in our backyards. Go out, look at the skies, have that intention, open your hearts. That's what it's all about. So, Craig, thank you. It's been a wonderful chat.
You are so welcome. And let me just also leave you with this is everything goes in a cycle.
Yeah,
So although it didn't happen back then in the 50s, because we're talking about it now and the world is getting prepared, for this changeover, right? At some point it will happen. So
yeah.
that's what we have to look forward to.
Yeah. And there's also that piece of everything happens in that divine timing, right? Like there is
Yes,
that bigger.
absolutely.
So there's a surrender into that as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Yeah. Craig, tell us about your upcoming projects and where people can find you.
Well, I'll give you my website. It's autobiography of unanet.com. There are I have a four-part book series that are called The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga. Everyone can get them there. And then if you click on other books, is where you can get the ET Almanac and the UFO Hotspot Compendium, all the places to visit before you die or are abducted. That's my favorite. I didn't come up with that line, the publisher did. I thought it was great. Um, And we now have the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac documentary ready. So it's being released on DVD first. You can only get them on my website. So you can get them at Autobiography of an ET. And if you click on other books, that's where you can purchase it. And I'm doing the pre-orders now. I should have the DVDs in like 2 to 3 weeks, and then they'll get mailed out. Great Christmas presents for all your ET friends.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Craig. It's been a wonderful conversation. And for everyone who's watching First Contact, if you enjoyed the show, give us a like, comment, share, tell all your friends about it. This is where all the First Contact magic is happening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.